Here we are again. It is Math with Marty time, and if you haven't figured out by now, if you're viewing regularly, you hope we've noticed that we're now appearing Tuesday nights at 10:30 on both sides of the Red River. And we hope to continue to bring you high-quality math programming, but unfortunately we're not always all that much on the ball, like last week when we had this beautiful topic all lined up for you guys, and then we didn't quite finish it off in as good a mathematical way as we'd really think we should have been able to. So I think we're going to go back to the board and try and explain the ending of last week's topic so you can understand it better. I'm going to head for the big board. Now, our topic last week concerned itself with the principle of least action, which is a way of understanding trajectories which seems to defy common sense, at least any kind of common sense that you develop in your studies of physics, where you initially look at things like Newton's laws of motion and force equals mass times acceleration, or even the principle of energy, where the kinetic energy is gained at the expense of loss in potential energy, and those kind of principles. All that seems to be thrown out the window by this principle developed by Lagrange and others in the 1700s, which says what they want you to look at is not the total energy, which you can think of as the sum of kinetic energy and potential energy. They want you to look at a quantity relating to the difference between the kinetic energy and the potential energy, which is called the action, and there's a factor of time that gets multiplied into it. And we tried to show you last week how to use this action principle, and we didn't do all that good. And I think we can now maybe do it better. I should have said last week when I did the example that the example we chose was, of course, borrowed directly from the Feynman Lectures on Physics, which is beautiful book, highly recommended to anyone that wants to enjoy reading about physics and how things work. And lights on both cameras. I wonder if I'm smart enough to figure out which camera I should be watching. Okay, thanks. You know, he's putting his hand over that. Oh, that's not a light on the camera. It's the backlights shining through from the powerful beams from the top of the studio are shining through the little red sign behind the number on the lamp, making it appear to be illuminated. We're now going to show you how this thing works. And the deal is, we have a ball which we want to get from point A to point B. And in this system of looking at things, they tell you how long it takes to get from here to there, and then you got to figure out what it does. And it seems ridiculous because we say the ball takes from 5 seconds to get from here to there, and well, why would it take 5 seconds to go that distance? Only because someone threw it up real high in the air and it took that long to come down again. And here's how they want you to figure out the trajectory. The idea is that in the 5 seconds it spends getting from here to there, it is very economical as far as using its kinetic energy over that time, which means it will try and keep its kinetic energy as average as possible in the most steady possible way. In any excursions where it went up or down, causing it to use more kinetic energy at some times and less at other times, would be considered bad. So you get points for not using a lot of kinetic energy. But they also give you points for something else, which is gaining a lot of potential energy during your trajectory. The particle likes to be high up. And it gets points for being high up. But you see, the problem is, to gain those points for getting high up, it only has a limited time to get here to there. And if it's going to try and gain points by being very high up, then it must be having to travel very fast to get there. And excess speed is considered a bad thing because it's burning more kinetic energy than you want to. And the particle, what it seeks to do, or the ball, or what you want to call it, it takes a trajectory that somehow manages to find an optimum between gaining Brownian points for high potential energy, while not incurring penalties for high kinetic energy, which is to say the velocity aspect of its energy. And the way this works mathematically is you get points for the potential energy. You get points for that, but you lose points, which we give it a minus sign, for kinetic energy. And you multiply this quantity at every instant by the time interval over which these conditions hold, and add it up over the entire course of the trajectory. To say it properly, we should say that this quantity is evaluated for every small little interval of time, which we would call delta t, and then it's added up. It's a matter of gaining as many Brownian points as you can. And it's interesting that if gravity were not involved, there would be no benefit. There's no more higher potential energy, for example, if this is done far in deep outer space. There's no gain of potential energy for any change in position. So there's no points to be gained by reaching for more potential energy. So the best you can do is minimize your kinetic energy. And it's fairly clear mathematically, if you have any practice with working out these things, that if you're given 5 seconds to get from here to there, and you want your total kinetic energy over that time interval to add up to a minimum, that the best thing to do is to go at exactly the same speed throughout, because if you go twice as fast at the start and then slow down and go half as fast at the end, since kinetic energy goes as the square of the velocity, the stuff when you were going twice as fast, well that had 4 times as much kinetic energy, and when you're going, even if you're going a lot slower, the kinetic energy that you're not using then won't save you from the stuff you wasted over here when you were going faster. That's a bad picture. And yet when we introduce the presence of gravity into the picture, so that there's points to be gained for having more potential energy, then the rules of the game are different, because it's fairly clear that for a shallow path which just slightly goes above the flat trajectory, that you don't need to waste all that much kinetic energy to gain quite a lot of height, because the length of this path here is almost the same length as the straight path. It's not very much farther. So you could go at the same speed along this path, or just very slightly faster, and you'd get here, and you'd incur only a very small amount of bad kinetic energy in doing that, whereas the gain in potential energy you have by gaining altitude is fairly substantial. So up to a certain point, there's a definite benefit in going higher, because for the slight penalties of kinetic energy, there's a fairly good gain in potential energy. But this can't go on indefinitely, because if that went on indefinitely, you would say the particle should shoot up at an incredible velocity, and then it would go infinitely high and then come down. But that would be nuts if you did the calculation. You see that because the potential energy is linear with the height, it varies directly with the height that you achieve, whereas the kinetic energy is a quadratic term. It goes as the square of the velocity. If you want to get so high in such a given time, you need a certain velocity. If you want it to go twice as high, you need twice the velocity. And with twice the velocity, you'd be having 4 times the kinetic energy over that interval, which is to say your kinetic term goes quadratically, whereas the potential energy you gain is a direct function of the height. It's directly the force times the distance. And whenever you have 2 quantities in a calculation, which can be varied, and one of them is linear in a certain variable and the other is quadratic in the same variable, there's always going to be a balance point where the gain in one is exactly equal to the deficit in the other. It's always going to be a fact with when there's 2 terms of that kind. And the miracle of the Lagrangian principle of dynamics is that the particle somehow chooses the path where it gets the best possible value of this quantity, potential takeaway kinetic energy, of all possible trajectories that it could have possibly taken. Any idiotic thing it could do that you might think it would do in 5 seconds, all those things that it doesn't do, if you actually evaluated the potential, take away the kinetic energy, multiplied by the total time on the trajectory, you would find that all these were not as good as the path that it actually takes. So the particle actually does an incredible process of optimization. And see, Rob can't stand it because three times already he's said to me, Marty, the light in camera 2 is not a light, it's just shining through the back of it. And I keep looking at camera 2 and forgetting I'm supposed to look at camera 1. So now he's pulled it off the set in disgust altogether. And I think at this time it's maybe just appropriate to go over to the organ and see what kind of song we got lined up.
Marty?
Well, Neil, what do you think we should do?
I guess we can play that Ricky Skaggs song we talked about.
Yeah, we could do that Ricky Skaggs song. That's a big hit for Ricky Skaggs in about 1982, which sort of coincides with about the time I started listening to country music. And I liked it then, and I like it now still. So let's do that. How does it... Somewhere the music's playing soft and low, and another holds the one that I love so. I was blind, I could not see that you meant the world to me, and like a fool I stood and watched you go. Now I'm crying my heart out over we used a musical device in there, which I'm sure some of you noticed when we did that key change in the middle of a song. That's a very common technique in popular music, and especially country music, for adding a change of brightness or a change of color to the song. You see, we were in the key of E. Yes, I'm crying my heart out over you. Now C7. Every night I climb the stairs. That's beautiful. You see it raises you half a whole pitch, then the whole song proceeds just as before, but half a pitch up. It's a simple trick, but it's very effective. The other thing that is quite often done in these kind of songs is that technique is brought in at a time when the words are also suggesting a rising or a climbing. In fact, the words in this key change were, every night I climb the stairs up. You see, climb, and the key was also climbing. So it's a little subtle point they use. Another example where they do that is Wolverton Mountain. Her tender lips. Now, how does it go? The bears and the birds tell Clifton Clowers, if a stranger should enter there. Now here we go. I'm a-going up. See, we did go up on Wolverton Mountain, but we went up half a pitch as well. You see, it's very clever. Another good example of that is, and this may be the guy that first invented it, may have been Eddie Arnold in that song. No, it wasn't Eddie Arnold. It was Jim Reeves. Put your sweet lips a little closer to the phone. And then he says, let's pretend that we're together all alone. Now watch this. I'll tell the man to turn the jukebox way down. Did you like that? You see, because when he said he was going to turn the jukebox way down low, his voice also went way down low. Did I have to explain that? Was it clear from the context? You see it?
I noticed in some songs when they do a modulation, they really add a lot of drama to the song. Or like,
oh yeah,
it's just
even
excitement.
You know
not in the country field, but the song "Love Will Keep Us Together" seems to stand on my mind as something where the suspension is like sort of clouds are disappearing and the sun is coming out.
Oh yeah, it's you know, Daryl Dragon, master of the keyboards. Remember the Cathode and Tennille, and they go up a whole tone in that.
Oh, okay.
You see, I like to go up a half tone, but going up a whole tone is a little different. Now, how does he do it in that song? And he's going, I will be there to share forever. Love will keep us together. It was beautiful. Well, you had to be there. And I was there back in 1975. You see, you young fellows in the studio, I mean, you're laughing at all this stuff because you don't remember those songs. You do, eh? Rob remembers it. Yeah, I bet you do. And, you know, a lot of times those hit songs in the radio, especially if you were working in a factory. I happened to be working in a factory that year, and that's where the radio was on quite a lot. So that was a big song. And the other song that was competing with Love Will Keep Us Together for airplay was Debbie Boone, You Light Up My Life, if I'm right, in the same year. I think they were both 1975. I think they were both getting a lot of airplay. And I think it was winter I worked in a plastics factory called Spears McGonigal, where, among other things, we used to make... have you ever gone to Salisbury House and bought a tray of donuts? And they give you these sort of a plastic folding over thing with 6 donuts in it? We used to make those with sort of a plastic kind of product. I don't think Spears is still making them. As a matter of fact, he's not really in the plastic business anymore, but I understand he occasionally catches my show, so to Mr. Spears and his wife. Greetings from the people at Math with Marty. And I think about that job every time I buy one of them donuts. Are we going to do any more math today? Well, let's go back to the board and take this lousy topic off the board. Did you like it? I like this topic. What am I going to do now? Well, it's a funny thing when I think I probably have just enough time to finally clean this topic up, because when I started doing it, I said there were 4 ways of analyzing the trajectory of a particle. And I sort of, in previous shows, I talked about them. Okay, this camera, I see. In previous shows, I did talk about them, and at the start of this show, I sort of alluded to them. There's the force equals mass times acceleration, where you plot it inch by saying that at each instant the acceleration is changing the directory of its motion. Then there's your kinetic energy equals potential energy method, where you say that we want to know how fast it's traveling when it's moved up this far, and we can only say that if it's gained this much potential energy, that it must come at the expense of its kinetic energy, so it must be going so much slower based on conversion of one form of energy into another. Then there's this bizarre principle of least action, where the particle builds up brownie points by gaining potential energy while keeping its kinetic energy low for no good reason, and yet the particle is smart enough to calculate the path which will get it from here to there in a given interval of time while maximizing this particular figure of merit called the action principle. And there's a 4th way, which I didn't say yet what it is, but it is a way of looking at things motivated by relativity. And in relativity, we say that the speed of time, the rate at which time passes, depends on numerous things. A lot of us have heard of this thing where they say when something's traveling near the speed of light, that time slows down. And that's why someone could travel far away, and when they come back, everyone else had aged, and these people are still young, and they said, well, it's because time slows down when you're traveling near the speed of light. Of course, time even slows down, according to this principle, when it's traveling at any speed, and the faster it's traveling, the more time slows down. But the other thing is that the passage of time is also affected by gravitation. If you're lower down in a gravitational field, time travels slower and travels faster. Travels slower, let's say. And if you're higher up, time travels faster. And time is going fast on the show. But the thing that the particle does is it finds some trajectory whereby a combination of the time is slowing down because it's traveling fast, but the time is speeding up because the thing is going higher. The time, or vice versa, something like that. The thing is, the time it takes the particle to get from here to there is measured on its own internal clocks is longer than any other path it could have taken. Ridiculous principle, but that's how it works. It maximizes the local calculation of time based on the principles of relativity. And really, I don't have anything to say about that, except it just goes to show how bizarre the universe can be when you look at it in different perspectives. And we don't really know how we're supposed to look at things in order to understand the way all this stuff works. But we got lots of different theories going. Well, let's head back to the old keyboards, and what are we going to close out the show with, Neil?
Besame, Mucho.
I don't know the words to this. Let's do it on the organ. That's beautiful. interesting. Let's try this one. I like this one. They told us there was only a minute left in the show, but this deal might scare us. But they're letting us twist in the wind here. Let's try one more sound.